Hey everybody, in today's video it's just going to be slightly different to normal. We've obviously just had the launch of the D780, which I have here, and everybody at this time of year always likes to do either prediction videos or kind of what to expect in the coming year in the photography industry. And I wish I could do a video like that, but for obvious reasons I can't, because it wouldn't be a prediction video. So what I thought I would do instead is just kind of a video talking about my thoughts of the launch of D780, what that means for DSLR, kind of Z series stuff, what I feel that will affect kind of my photography, just kind of my wider feelings really, just to kind of make this an open discussion rather than about, always just testing cameras and that type of stuff. I think it can be useful just to have open discussions about what people think about certain cameras and all different types of stuff. So in kind of today's video, I'm going to focus on mainly kind of D780 launch and what that means from my point of view and kind of what that means to my photography. So if you've got to this video and you haven't seen my other D780 video where I go through specifications, new features, that type of stuff, I'll put a link to that somewhere up here somewhere. So I would advise that you go and watch that if you want to know about specifications, what the camera can do, what new features are in this 780 that aren't in other DSLRs. If you're interested in the camera specifically, then go check that video out that I made. If not, and you're kind of more interested in my thoughts, then this is the right place to be. I've had the D780 for a while now, and I have been using it for everything from kind of stills to video. So this is not kind of a knee-jerk reaction without actually using the camera. One of the things that I always quite like doing is only talking about things that I have or things that I've had usage of. The biggest things for me is that I can absolutely understand why the D780 exists. There are still a lot of photographers out there that already own maybe a 750 and they didn't want to switch to a Z6, or they want to upgrade from another DSLR and they don't want to go into mirrorless right now. And obviously this new D780 brings together a lot of the advantages that you would have got from a Z6 in terms of video and on-sensor phase detection autofocus, and that starts to kind of merge the two lines together. Obviously, fundamentally, it is still a DSLR. It's got an optical viewfinder. There's no hybrid viewfinder or anything like that, so it's still an optical viewfinder. And there's a couple of things in here that some people may have missed, or it might have been the reason that they didn't go to a Z series. It might have been dual card slots, it might have been optical viewfinder, it might have been the fact that the body is chunkier and heavier. Some people prefer that. So I do absolutely feel like this camera is going to be suitable for a lot of people out there who don't want to go to mirrorless just yet. And for those people, it will be a wonderful camera to use and a wonderful camera to shoot with. Now, I would expect that when I start doing my tests on the D780 and when we start doing kind of comparisons of high ISO tests against Z6, Z7, that type of stuff, I'm expecting it to be pretty much identical, as you guys would expect. It's the same processor, pretty much the same sensor, and we're in a situation where it's just a year newer, so there might have been a few tweaks to the processing unit, or there might have been a few tweaks to the sensor itself. So there is a couple of things that could have changed, and we can go and find those out. But the biggest thing for me, and the reason why I kind of wanted to make this video in the first place, is I'm still going to stick with my Z6 and Z7. This camera is specifically designed and made for people who want a DSLR, and I've been a DSLR shooter for a long time. Before my Z6 and Z7, I've used D800, D810, D850, D4S, D5, D500, they're D750. They've all been cameras that I've shot with professionally and used for a long period of time. And generally, my kind of upgrade path was that anything that was kind of low light and my wildlife and sports stuff that I shoot, then I generally go towards kind of D4Ss, D5s. And anything that was kind of my landscape type work would have been D800, D810, D850. D500 I also enjoyed using for wildlife and sport as well, just for kind of that cropped camera. Out of all of those cameras, probably my most used was the D850, just because of how much of a jump that was from kind of the D810, and a lot of people still see the D850 as one of the best DSLRs that ever existed. And this takes some of that and some of that kind of technology that we had in the D850 and kind of even looks slightly similar. So its design and button layout are designed so that they look similar to the 850. And that's also kind of where the name comes from as well, of D780. So I have been a DSLR user through and through, extensively shot on a large number of Nikon cameras. But as soon as Z6 and Z7 came along, I instantly fell in love with them, and I've not used a DSLR since. There hasn't been a situation where I've needed to go back to either a D850 or a D5 or my D500, for example, for any type of my photography. Everything from kind of kingfishers to sports photography, portrait photography. I do a lot of dance and theatre photography as well. So that was the theatre performances, like the really low light, spotlight, ballet and things like that. That was the last type of photography that I do that moved over. So that was the situation where I'd be using normally a D5, and I had a session where I took both my D5 and a Z6 and a Z7, and that was kind of my transition period. And once I'd shot that, and it was pretty successful, I had some shots on a D5, some shots on a Z6 and some on a Z7, and I was really impressed with the performance of the Z6. So the next performance that I shot, I didn't take the D5 at all, and that was a situation where I solely shot Z6 and Z7, and ever since then I've not looked back. For me, it is just the fact that I prefer to shoot with those bodies. Now obviously there's going to be photographers out there who need certain requirements that can only be achieved by certain camera bodies, like a D5 or a D500, etc. So I'm not saying that, you know, Z6 and Z7 are perfect for everybody. They're not. They're perfect for me. What I kind of want to try and get across is the emphasis that this is a DSLR made for DSLR users with some advantages borrowed from the mirrorless world. So it's going to give a DSLR user lots of advantages that they've not had in previous DSLRs, like the on-sensor phase detection autofocus, especially obviously for Nikon users. So the video autofocus is going to be great. To me, that's what this is designed for. It's basically for photographers who are wanting some of those advantages that they keep hearing about in mirrorless cameras, but they still want the form factor, they still want F-mount, they still want an optical viewfinder. So I do feel like there's a lot of people that want some of the benefits of a DSLR and also want some of the benefits of a mirrorless camera, and this is kind of there. But that being said, obviously because I am an avid user of Z6 and Z7, it's not the camera that's going to make me go back to DSLR, and I don't think any camera would make me do that. One of the main reasons for that is the Z series lenses. Their optical performance is just unbelievable. Those of you that have been subscribed to my channel or watched some of my videos before, you know that in pretty much every single situation, the Z mount lens will outperform the F mount lens. And I kind of have in the back of my mind that if I go back to a D850 or if I go back to a D780, I'm in a situation where I'm using F mount lenses again. Now obviously there are some amazing F mount lenses, the 500mm f5.6, the 105 1.4 for example. So I'm not discounting those lenses, but what I am saying is that across the board, if you think about the Z series 50mm 1.8, if you think about the Z series 24 to 72.8 and the Z series 70 to 200 2.8, all of those lenses are better than their F-mount counterparts. And that is the draw for me. It is that when we know that we've got those newer lenses coming out, when those new lenses from the Z series stuff start to arrive, we know that the anticipation is that they will be better than their F-mount counterparts. So if I can go out with a Z7 and the Z 50mm 1.8 and produce incredibly sharp, wonderful images that I could not produce if I was to take a D850 with its 50mm 1.8, because it's just that 50mm 1.8 lets the D850 down. So to me, lenses, optical performance is what's kind of driving me towards the Z6 and Z7, and that's kind of why I don't think I will have a D780 that will kind of be my everyday camera. It's not going to replace the Z6 for me. The advantages that are in here are going to be perfect for, as I say, a DSLR photographer. Optical viewfinder, F-mount, better battery life, all that type of stuff is still in here. But for me, Z6 and Z7 is perfect. Battery life is more than good enough for me. The focusing system is absolutely fantastic. I use my Z7 to shoot kingfishers in flight. I'm using a Z6 to record this now. So that's why I don't feel like I'll move to another camera just yet. But as I mentioned at the start of this video, I want this to be a discussion. So obviously there'll be tons of you that will have loads of comments to put in the comments section. I'm going to try and reply to as many of those as possible because I want this to be an open discussion about where people kind of feel like this camera sits, who's going to use it, who might be interested in one. I would still buy a Z6 over a 780, but that's because I know that I prefer the mirrorless Z series system, and I know and I've seen firsthand the benefit I get from Z series glass. Some of you watching this might just be solid DSLR users, and you've not used Z series glass and seen kind of some of those new lenses, so you're kind of none the wiser, and I get that. And you might already have all of that F-mount glass that you want to keep using, and that's fine. And you're not interested in buying new lenses, especially if you've got like the older D series lenses as well. This kind of makes more sense. It does have a pin to drive D series lenses, so that's where I think this camera sits for people who have those older lenses but do want a newer camera without going to mirrorless or without going to a really high megapixel count like they have to do with the D850, for example. It's a really nice camera and it will give fantastic results in stills and now in video. This is going to be the best performing Nikon DSLR for video, period. There's nothing that can kind of compete with this from a DSLR's point of view in Nikon's lineup. The only thing that will come close is a Z6 and a Z7, but obviously they're mirrorless, they're different mounts. I think the wider picture is that this camera shows, and especially also with the fact that we know that the D6 is on the way as well, this kind of shows that Nikon is committed to F-mount and DSLR, and also committed to Z-mount and kind of Z-series stuff as well. And this year is going to be incredibly exciting. There's a lot of interesting stuff on the way, and there's going to be a lot of people who kind of have to decide. Are they going to still have kind of their DSLR system, or are they going to be moving to kind of Z-series stuff? And it is going to be a hard time for someone to decide exactly what's going to be best for them. I obviously feel like currently Z6 and Z7 is what's best for me, and that's why I use them on a daily basis, and I literally can't think of the last time where I've had a day where I haven't picked a camera up. Z50 obviously most recently is kind of what I've been shooting, and I absolutely love that little thing. I've never really used a massive amount of DX cameras previously. The only real one is D500. So to me, it's like kind of my first real time shooting with a really small, kind of lightweight, but still DX camera. The last time really was the Coolpix A, if any of you can remember that. That was a DX size sensor in a really tiny kind of compact camera. I really love that camera. So the Z50 is kind of like a changeable lens version of that really, with a viewfinder on the top, and always prefer to have a viewfinder than not. So to kind of summarize, for me, D780 is a camera that had to exist. It's a camera that there's still a lot of people out there that will be interested in wanting a DSLR that's an upgrade from an existing DSLR. They might still have D700, they might still have D750, they might have an 810 or an 800 and they don't know what to upgrade to. So I think that there is still a lot of people out there that this camera is going to be appealing to. However, you're in a situation where you were already kind of thinking about going mirrorless and you're unsure about going either Z6 or sticking with kind of D850 or sticking with DSLR, and you're in that position now where you don't know if you should go mirrorless, you don't know if you go to Z6 or 780. Personally, my opinion would be that I personally would choose a Z6, and that's why I use a Z6 myself. The Z series stuff for me just works wonderfully well, and that's why I kind of moved across. So if you are in that position where you aren't quite sure, if you want to be a DSLR user, if you want the optical viewfinder, the grip, better battery life, F-mount, that's where the 780 comes in. But if you are wanting some of those mirrorless features, then that's where the Z6 comes in. So as I mentioned, we've got a really interesting year ahead of us. First launch is obviously the launch of the 780. Any questions you have about this, then please do put in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you found this video useful. Just interesting for me to just sit down and just kind of talk about what's on my mind and just throw some ideas out there. If you have found it useful, then please do let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.